Yesterday we did a belly button cast on for our pie-shaped circle knit from the center out. And we also knitted the first round. The pie shaping is something that was introduced by Elizabeth Zimmerman in the early 1980s. She did a shawl based on the principle of pi, and that every time a circle doubles in circumference, the diameter too must double. So we increased our stitches right away from 4 until 8, and the 8 stitches will form our cast on. And that cast on, after we did that, we knitted one round. Pi increases quite quickly in the beginning, so immediately we're going to double our stitches from 8 to 16. And we're going to do that using make one increases. So we're going to take that loop from between the 2 stitches, and then we're going to knit the next stitch. Again, we're going to do make one, knit one all the way around. Ooh, this is tight. Make one, knit one. I like to do this for the first, particularly the first couple of increase rounds for pie shaping, because it keeps a nice closed increase, and you can keep a good it keeps the center looking quite closed up and tidy. Make one, knit one. Oop, lost my loop. Make one, knit one. Now if I stop, you can see I've got 4 stitches on each of these needles, 2 stitches on each of these needles, so I need to do this a couple more times. A little tip too is, if you find your stitches are inclined to fall off your double pointed needles, try and center them on the needle. If you can keep them centered toward the center, they have less place to go. That's the 3rd needle done. And one more. Make one, knit one. Lost my stitches. Captured my make one, so I do my knit one, and then I've got to fish a little bit for that last make one. Alright, it doesn't want to play. There we go. Knit the make one loop and knit the last stitch. There. Again, I'm just going to take my I-cord tail and just drag it down so you can see the knitting. And now you can see we've got 16 stitches balanced on 4 needles. The next thing we're going to do is, now we did one round in between the increase to 8 and the increase to 16. So now we're going to do 2 rounds before we do our next increase. And we're just going to knit them plain. If you're concerned about losing track of where the start of your round is, it's pretty much going to be in that gap where you're at the end of your I-cord. But if you're concerned about it, you can also place a stitch marker right there. and then you'll always know. The nice thing about pie shaping is that you're going to be doing your increases all in one round, so you only need one stitch marker as a reminder of when to do your increases. You do have to keep track of your rows a little bit though, and for that you can either use a pen and paper or a row counter or a piece of software for your phone. You can see now I'm coming up on the end of my round because my marker is over here on the left. And I have to knit one more round, so I'm going to pause the camera and do that, and then I'll come back and show the next increase round. So here we are, we've done 2 plain knitted rounds in between our last increase and this point. Now we're going to take our stitches, we're going to double them again from 16 to 32. We're going to do the same type of closed increase using the make one. Again, you can use yarn overs, but in the center it helps to keep the circle closed up and neat looking. And if you want to make a closed circle too, it's a good alternative to a yarn over, which gives you a more lacy effect. So we're going to do the same thing. It's going to be make one, knit one, all the way around. So I'm going to do the first needle, then I'll sign off. Make one, knit one. It's hard to see the needle tip behind that other needle. No, you don't. Pop-up lesson, and when you have a drop stitch, just make sure you've got both strands, put it back on the needle the proper way, and then carry back on with what you were doing. In my case, it was a make one. A tight little make one. Knit one. And the last. Make one and knit one. And I'm going to do this the rest of the way around. We'll pause. You can knit along if you want, and just pause the video, and we'll meet you back here at the end of the round. Although, once I finish this round, we will be doing 4 rounds knit plain. So if you want to just pause and go ahead and do all of that, you can go right ahead. Here we are with our finished round of increases, and now we have 32 stitches on 4 needles, which means we have 8 stitches on each needle. The next thing, as I mentioned earlier, is to knit 4 rounds plain because we're doubling every time. So we did 8 stitches, and then we knit 1 round, then we did increase to 16 stitches, knit 2 rounds. Now we've increased to 32 stitches, so we're going to knit 4 rounds, and then we're going to double again to 64 stitches. For the 64 stitch one, I'm going to start using open increases so that you can see the lace effect. So if you're following along, now we're going to knit 4 rounds plain, and I will do that, and we'll pause and come back for the open increases. We've knit now the 4 plain rounds after our increasing to 32 stitches, and we're ready to start our yarn over increases. In our spiral sample, we did the yarn overs in front of the stitch, on the double pointed needle. On this sample, we're going to do knit 1, yarn over, so that when we get to the end of each needle, we will have knit 1, yarn over, and I'll show you how to do a yarn over on a double pointed needle at the end of the needle. Knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over. And again, I'm going to do this needle, and I'll talk a bit about that yarn over at the end of the needle. At the end of this needle, then I'm going to pause, and I'm going to knit the rest of the increase round, and then I'm going to knit, now we need 8 plain rounds in between. So here's our last stitch knit, and then we do our yarn over at the end of a double pointed needle, much the same as we do on a straight needle. It's just how we do it when we make the transition to the next needle. So we've looped it just as we would a regular yarn over on straight needles or circulars. And now I knit the next stitch, bringing the yarn down behind the last needle I was working with. So knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over. We'll do to the end of this needle so that you can see again how I do that transition, and then I'll pause, and as I say, I will finish this round and I'll knit 8 plain rounds before we do our final round of increases. So I knit my last stitch, I do a yarn over, I turn my work a quarter turn, and I put my needle tip in and bring my yarn behind the last needle I was working with and knit the next stitch. We've now finished our 8 plain rounds knit between our increase to 64 stitches, and we're ready to start our next increase, which is going to take us to 128 stitches. As you can see, our sample is now almost filling the frame, and we don't really have a whole lot of room left on our needles. So it's about this time that I would switch over to a circular needle. So we're going to do our increase row this time the same way we did the last one. Knit 1, yarn over, right all the way around the row. But we're going to introduce a second needle so that we can have all our stitches comfortably on one, and we're going to flip to circular. I'm only going to do the stitches for the first needle, and then I'm going to pause the video and you can complete the round. And following the 128 stitch increase round, we would now knit 16 rounds between here and the next increase round. At this point, you will see that our increases are going to get a little bunched up where they're created, and by the time you get to the next increase, you'll see that the stitches are a little bit stretched out. There's some advantages to the pie shaping in that you have some design options. This span down through this area, we've got 64 stitches around here. That means that we could accommodate a pattern of some sort, whether it's color stranded or open work, or knit purl. We could even do a knit purl design, and we could accommodate a multiple of 4, a multiple of 8, or a multiple of 16 to work out to our 64 stitches. So it would have to be a relatively small design, but you'd have this space in which to do it. Once you've got 128, you've got double this amount of room to work it with as a canvas, so you start running into some interesting design possibilities. I've knit at least 2 pie shawls over time, and I really like doing them. Again, I run into the situation where the stitches bunch up a little wherever you do your increases, and it takes it takes a bit of blocking, pressing, whatever I can do with the yarn fiber content to be able to get that worked out. So I'll pause the video now, and then I'll do a few rounds. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is when you're ready to do your cast off, and this sample is already larger, I think, than the other two, you need to, there's a couple of things you need to consider. If I was to cast off here, this edge would ruffle quite badly because it's a sudden increase. So what I'll do is I would knit at least 4 more rounds before I cast off. The other thing to consider is that because this is stocking stitch, if I just knit out and cast off, it's going to curl. So I'm not going to knit the full 16 rounds, but once I've finished this round, I will knit a section, and I'll knit a few rounds in garter stitch, which when we're working circular is knit 1 round, purl 1 round, and then I will do my cast off. So I'm going to finish this round and come back and show you what I did. Here's our finished pie sample. You can see that we've got a nice circular formation. We've got a nice gentle arc around the outside edge. It lays nice and flat. To finish it off, as I said, I did some plain rounds. After I increased to 128 stitches, I did some plain rounds. I did 6 knit rounds, and then I did a purl round, and then a knit round, and I repeated that again and finished off with a purl round, and then did the cast off. You can see that it lays nice and flat, and you can also see that it grows quite quickly. I mentioned earlier in the video that when you first do your increase, your stitches tend to bunch up a little, and you can see it here and here. And then you can also see what I had commented, that by the time you're ready to do your next increase round, you get that little bit of stretchiness in the stitches right before that last increase round. And that's because our stitch count has remained constant for all these rounds, but the circle has continued to grow.